Hello, I'm Kate. I'm an educator at the Maine State Museum. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the museum. We know not everybody's been there, or it may have been a few years, and also talk about how that ties into the program that you're part of today. The museum's mission is to share what is meaningful about Maine and its place in the world in order to inspire people to discover Maine's past, understand its present, and imagine its future. We are based in Augusta. We're one of the oldest state-funded museums, and the current building is shared with our neighbors at the Maine State Library and Maine State Archives, who were all affected by the current building closure. The building closed in June 2020, not because of the pandemic, but for asbestos abatement and mechanical repairs. That work is going on right now as we speak. It's a multi-year project. We didn't want to close, but we're looking at it as an opportunity for growth. All right, so I'm going to talk about who comes to the museum, and these are obviously numbers from before the museum closed. There are an average of 43 and 51,000 visitors per year. In 2019, that broke down to about 173 people per day. There were over 1,000 groups who came, over 1,000 programs and tours we hosted. And we give the admission fees just to emphasize that affordability and accessibility are really important. In fact, about 40% of everybody who comes to the museum comes in for free. Educational programming and events are a big focus. We have free programs for K-12 students and adults. Those used to happen right in the museum's galleries, but we've moved those online for virtual presentations and workshops. We know that for many Maine students, this is their first introduction to museums and their first chance to explore Maine history with their own hands. Here you can see where groups are coming from across the state of Maine. The museum has around 800,000 objects in its collection. So those include natural history, archaeology, historic artifacts, and the museum seeks out Maine-made items or objects with specific Maine stories. All right, so what's up with this barrel? If you're not a numbers person, you like to focus on detailed examples like myself. The Maine State Museum collects artifacts and uses them to tell stories. So some things that are valuable and fancy, others that look maybe a little bit more ordinary and plain, like this barrel. So this is a potato barrel, and barrels like this have been used by generations of people in Maine to harvest potatoes. About 4 baskets can fill one barrel. That's about 120 pounds of potatoes. This particular one was used in an exhibit about World War I, and why on earth would that be? This is from around 1910 from a family in Fort Fairfield, Aroostook County. Containers like this one here were used to harvest 5,000 barrels of potatoes for delivery from Aroostook County fields to European refugees during World War I. All right, so this photo and newspaper quote from around this time period tell part of that story. The McDougall farm here sat on the Bangor and Aroostook Railroad line. You can see the train car here. This is Aroostook Special Belgian Relief Train. The potatoes were carried to Boston in heated boxcars, and from there they were loaded on a ship to Belgium. All right, so just with this one photo and object as an example, you could talk about farming, about international relations, about Aroostook County history, about hunger, warfare, Maine's role in global events, livelihoods, community support, refugees, child labor, and connect to migrant workers today. So hopefully that gives you an example of how objects can tell stories. So we'll just take a quick look at the exhibits that have been in the museum. These are some scenes from some of our permanent exhibits. And we also have temporary exhibits that move through the space. They've ranged from topics like Malaga Island to women's suffrage. And this view might look familiar if you've ever been to the museum. It greets you right when you walk in the front door. And this main floor is the one that's going to be redesigned. Just to orient you into the space, here's our map. That train is right here. You walk in the front desk at the bottom, and the layout of the museum there. So side by side, we can compare that existing space to what the museum's going to be like when we reopen. And I will zoom in on that. This section on the left is an education center that was a project already under works. It's going to be a very interactive, engaged space designed for families and students in grades 4 through 8. On the right, we have a space to talk about the environment in the Gulf of Maine. And then this central section will be clusters of different exhibits on topics that relate to Maine. And that relates to our program today, because we know that people come to us to learn about what Maine is. Not only people in Maine, but tourists who want an introduction to the state. And that's a pretty important responsibility and opportunity. There's a pretty big opportunity to have an impact on people when we talk about what stories we tell in the museum. We know that nationally people really put their trust in museums. They believe in them. Survey after survey shows that people think that museums are more reliable than the media or other sources of information. So the Maine State Museum is a space to learn not only about the history and natural history of the state, but also its identity. What does it mean to live in Maine? What stories do we value here? And the listening tour ties into all of that. We are seeking community input to find the stories and broader themes that resonate with and reflect the many voices, interests, and identities of the people of Maine. So we've had programs just like this one today in different communities across the state. Your responses are going to inform the museum's ongoing work with a special focus on developing that new exhibit floor that we were looking at together. So here's the process. We are talking with people across Maine, we're collecting their responses to questions, and then we're using that data to guide exhibits and future work. And I want to pause to thank our fantastic advisory committee. All of these folks helped us plan the program, design the dialogue questions, plan the conversation, and we also want to thank our partners at Maine Humanities Council for getting this dialogue event going. All right, so you might be wondering how your answers to the questions today are going to be used. There might be results that aren't apparent right now. We might hear a story that turns into an exhibit 10 years from now. We might connect to someone who will collaborate on a new public program. We might get a piece of family history into our collection that will be enjoyed by future generations. Your words today might inform the educational work we do with teachers and students. But above all, we are so grateful to you for being part of this work. Thank you so much for joining us today. Your time and support mean so much to us.